So folks, I'm going to start off doing we're just going to create a small little room, just a small little environment today. This follows along a tutorial that's on the Unreal. It's like getting to know the Unreal interface. It's like the first kind of tutorial I'm getting familiar with Unreal. It's fairly straightforward. If you've used the Unreal Engine before, I'd say just push yourself to do different things. We're going to just be kind of going fairly slowly at the start so everyone gets up to speed in it. So, as always, we're going to create a new project. I'm going to create this as a game project. I'm going to hit next. I'm going to use a blank template. I'm going to make sure that blueprints is fine. We're not going to be using blueprints. The one thing that is important is I want this to make sure that this starter content is there. And I'm just going to call this my first level. I'm actually going to turn off. Sorry with floodlights here. So, sorry, that should make it easier for folks to see. So, I'm going to call this my first level. One thing to know with Unreal, you can, I think, have spaces in project files, but generally with any piece of software like this, I think you're better off avoid spaces in anything basically. So any levels you create, anything like that, try and use camel case basically, where you mush the words together with capitals. The reason being that I don't know if you've ever seen, if you create a folder and it has a space in it, and then you look at the address of that folder, it changes the folder address to %, something in between the two words, and that sometimes can cause issues. So again, when we're naming things, it's fine if it's stuff that's in the game, but anything that the engine's using, try and use camel case. The ergonomics of this position are very, very poor. I still need to clear up my hard drive. Cool. So folks, hopefully you're all familiar with this interface. This is basically what we see when we open up the Unreal Engine. Okay, it's our first sort of introduction to it. What we're going to do is, I think we're going to just start with a blank room, and we're just going to build it up to have a blank scene, a blank level, and we're going to build it up to be something like this. So to create a new level, we're going to go File, New Level. We've different options here. Okay, we've the default, empty level, time of day, your base. I'm just going to go with default for today because it gives us a skybox and stuff, and some reflection probes and player start. We will in a few weeks we'll move on to using a completely blank level, because if we're building an indoor space, often we might necessarily even want the skybox at all. Okay, so again, we can start with things that are completely blank. For this level, I think it's nice to have a little bit of background environment, basically. One thing I'm going to do is select the ground here, and I'm going to hit delete on it. Okay. So that basically is my level. There's nothing there, no geometry. If we were to make this into a game, there's nothing to stand on or nothing to see. What I'm going to do first is create the ground, and there's a few different ways I could do that. Okay, and today we're going to use all 3 different ways we could create different objects in the world. So the first is in the basic geometry. Okay, I can grab a cube, drag that in here. Same as the inspector in Unity. It gives you a location of it. I don't know why there's only 1 projector in this room, folks. There probably should be 3 projectors. Yeah, I don't know if it's useful. It might actually be useful to stream on Discord at the same time, so that people can see if they're far away. But basically, this is the same as inside in Unity. I can't even get over to show it, which is a nightmare. But basically, similar to what we see inside in Unity, we've got a location, X, Y, and Z, rotation, and scale. First thing I'm going to do, because this is my ground, I'm going to set it to 0, 0, and 0. Okay, and that just centers this cube in the world. Alright. Then I'm going to change a couple of the scales. So on the X dimension, I'm going to change this maybe to 10. Yeah. Now, I'm then going to change the Y to 10. And I'm going to change the Z to 0.2. Does anyone notice a difference there compared to what we would have been doing in Unity last year? Yeah, Y and Z are basically flipped compared to Unity. If you remember in Unity, Y was like the height, which I think makes sense with an XY graph. You know, we think of Y as being the vertical and X the horizontal. In Unreal, Z is like the depth thickness. So you have X and Y, which is your width and your depth, and then Z is the height. Okay, does that make sense? One way you can see that is this gizmo here. Okay, RGB. Okay, red, green, blue. Okay, X, Y, Z, basically. RGB, red, green, blue, X, Y, Z. Does that make sense? Yeah. It's just a different technology. I don't know why. I think it's probably the way the engine evolved over time. I find Unity a bit more intuitive of thinking of Y as being a height dimension. But it's just a practice thing. It's just a little bit of a funny quirk of the Unreal Engine. There's no good reason for it. Cool. So we've a lot of different shapes here that we could like drag into the game, and like kind of basic primitives like player start and things like that, and triggers. But what we're going to start working with now is a little bit of geometry. Okay, and this is a box, and you drag it in, and you look at it, and you kind of wonder, well, the texture on it's different, but like why? Like what's different about it, or why is it different? Okay, I know I showed this a little bit last week, I think, but with these sort of with geometry like this, we kind of have a little bit more control over what we're doing with it. We're able to like change the vertices of this. Okay, anything we create from that geometry panel, it basically acts like ProBuilder inside of Unity. We're able to move vertices around and things, and that's for good and bad. I'm going to move this to the edge here, and then I'm going to switch my layout to the 4-way split. You can right click on these windows to bring a thing into view. Okay, so right click and drag with your mouse, and you can pan basically these windows, and they all pan in unison basically. Okay. So that's that into view, and what I'm going to do is turn that into a wall. So I'm just going to move the vertices to make that into a wall. Okay, and I want just a wall running along this edge here. So first thing I'm going to do is in modes, which is this one with the paintbrush and the wrench and the pencil. I'm going to jump down to brush editing, and you can see this changes. This gets like a blue outline and kind of like this geometry basically turns white. Okay, and what I'm going to do is just draw a marquee selection around those. So click, drag, grab those points. It's not going to grab points of anything else. It's only going to do the box brush that's currently selected. Okay, so I'm going to drag these 2 points, and I'm going to try and make it 20 wide. Okay, I don't know if you remember last week I said about the small lines are 10 and the big lines are 100, so that should be 20 wide basically. And then I'm going to move into this view here, and I'm going to eyeball aligning this with that, and this with that. Now, can you see there the way the texture in the bottom viewport here? Just look at the way the texture kind of repeats itself. It doesn't stretch, basically. Can you see that? Those boxes aren't like getting bigger. It just basically wraps. It keeps like basically infinitely wrapping that texture, which is really nice, especially if you're creating like basic geometry like this. It's a very useful thing. So I'm going to drag that all the way to this line here. Let's go. Just going to make sure in the 3D view that is where I want it. Yeah, cool. So I've generated a wall. So at the minute this is 200 high, which is 2 meters high. Would 2 meters high be tall enough for a room, do you think? No, like I think I'm about 183 centimeters tall, so like that's maybe a room where the ceiling is like that high. So I would say here the ceiling's probably about 3 meters or so. So all I'm gonna do is drag these top points all the way up to that. Okay. Now, because this is centered, it's actually, I should go up one more, but it's easier to keep it on the big lines, and it's a 10 centimeter difference. It should be fine. But basically, this is our wall that represents our room, and it's a box brush. We can then leave this and go to select mode, and I'm going to go back to, I'm going to click that to maximize this viewport, and I now have this wall here. Okay. Now, I can select this, and I can hold down Alt on the keyboard and drag, and it's going to make a duplicate. Okay, so I hold down Alt, and then I click and drag, and it's going to duplicate that wall. That makes sense? Okay, and now I've got another one of these walls. Cool. So what I'm going to do here is just rotate this, and that is the E key on the keyboard. Rotate by 90 degrees. I'm going to jump back into this top-down view so that I can see what's going on. There. And I want to go back into move mode as W on the keyboard. Cool. So that's that aligned with there. You see there's a slight overlap here. That's okay, because what I'm going to do is basically make this, I'm going to make this like a room with a balcony, basically, so I want to make that wall a bit shorter anyway. So, to do that, again, I go back into brush editing, and I can select this, and I'm going to maybe make a balcony that's like 4 meters. Okay, I'm trying to align with the big grid there, just because it's a bit easier if we're working to the grid, basically. Move back to select mode. I can now maximize this top view, hold down Alt on the keyboard, drag this over to here. Okay, and now if I minimize that, maximize this. Okay, we've got the beginnings of our room. Alright, so we're going to have like a little room there. We'll maybe put a roof on it in a second, and then we'll start putting some furniture in there. So, I think we put on the roof first or windows? Any preference by anyone? Roof, yeah. Windows, yeah. Maybe windows makes sense first. And actually, if I'm going to do windows first, I'm going to delete this and I'm going to make my window over here. And to do that, all I'm going to do is hit Alt on the keyboard. Oh, sorry, I didn't do it that time. Alt on the keyboard, and I'm going to drag a copy of this wall. Okay, and I'm going to go into this view here. I'm going to go into my brush editing mode. Does anyone know how wide a window should be? Any guesses? Anyone want to guess what those windows are if we were to guess? We'll do something like those. Which? So each window pane, like what do we think? Maybe 1.5 meters or so? Is that fine? Like the width of it, basically? Yeah. Okay, we'll go 1.5 meters for these. Actually, that's about 1.5 there. Those windows are full height. We might not go quite. Are they full height? Do they go all the way to the ground? Yeah. Look, let's go a little bit off full height. So let's go 20 off full height that side. And the reason I'm going a little bit off full height is that I want to be able to what I want to be able to do with this window is basically if I put like framing around it, sometimes we like want to hide that in bits of geometry and stuff, and if we go right into the ground we can kind of get texturing problems. So I'm just kind of being a little bit lazy and avoiding some problems we might have down the line. If this was a thing that this is a gameplay window and like you want the player to break this window and like walk out of it, you might have a higher ledge so that there's like a prompt to mantle the window, or else a lower ledge so that there's no link at all. Okay? But if it's just a visual window, the player won't be able to break. They're probably safe enough to make it something like this. So I'm going to go back to selection mode. And with this window selected, down here on the right hand side in the details panel, you can see that what would be the inspector inside Unity. It says what type of brush it is. At the minute it's additive. What do you think will happen if I make it subtractive? Yeah, it's going to just cut out the whole, it's going to cut the window out first. Okay, so I'm just going to hit subtractive. And now, if I, so that's cut out that window for us. And I'm going to see if we can I think that's the right brush. I'm just going to double check and see if I drag that. Yeah, cool. So I'm going to see if we can make a couple of these. One, two, three, 1, 2, 3. Okay, I just wanted to check there that the spacing between them was equal. Okay, so we've got these nice sort of architectural windows on this side. Now, the tricky thing is going to be selecting these because we're just going to duplicate this to the other side. Yeah, I'm just going to do that. There's a way we can convert this to a static mesh, which turns into an asset we can use and apply other places. For now, I'm just going to use it as BSP, as geometry. So, to do that, I am going to draw a marquee selection over here. And if I hit Control on the keyboard, I just need to deselect anything that I didn't want selected. And I'm going to hit Alt on the keyboard and duplicate this across. Okay, cool. So this is our room. We've got our balcony, our windows. Next thing, our roof. Okay, there's a few different ways to create a roof. Any ideas what way we should create a roof, or we could create a roof? Which? Yeah. So we could extrude it. We could create a roof out of like one of these objects, but there's actually an easier way. Does anyone want to guess? Yeah, we can duplicate the floor. Okay, and we can be like super lazy here and duplicate the floor. Okay, so I'm just going to hit Alt on the keyboard. It's going to duplicate this. Again, I'm trying to align it with the grid. We've got one above it. Now, do you think there's anything I should do with that roof at the minute? Is our balcony very nice? Yeah, we're going to make it less. And to do that, we're just going to hit the scale tool, which is R on the keyboard. I don't mind having a slight overhang. Yeah, that's fine. Okay, so we've got a slight overhang there. We've got our roof. It's starting to feel a bit like a room, basically. We might even want, with something like this, we might want to actually increase the overhang in this direction as well. Okay, sometimes these flat roof buildings, the overhang that kind of goes over the building. One thing to know, right, about level design. Have you ever like glitched outside of a level in a game, or have you seen what that looks like? Yeah. If we have a game where our player is going to be playing on this balcony, they're looking at these windows, blah blah blah. Behind this wall, we can have whatever the fuck we want, basically, and no one's ever going to see it. Does that make sense? Okay, we can hide, as level designers, we get to hide things in the walls by like scaling something up, like scaling a rock so it looks like maybe light or something like that. We just get to like move things around, and as long as no one ever sees the other side of that lamp, they think, "Oh, cool, that's an unusual lamp." Does that make sense? We've got a lot of leeway to like do tricks, and level designers are very resourceful with how they use and apply their geometry, basically. Okay, cool. So I'm going to go back to this view now because we kind of got our geometry set up. You'll see here as well in Unreal, it's saying this lighting needs to be rebuilt. Okay, to fix that, we can hit this arrow here beside build, and we can hit build lighting only. Cool. Now, at the minute, our lighting quality is set to like a low pre-production quality, which is why we've got this here. We are able to change lighting quality here, like that's preview quality to like production quality. It will take longer to build it if you're just doing like kind of level design and stuff. It's not worth putting a ton of time into it. Okay? You don't want to do like production quality lighting until you're maybe before a playtest, basically, to make sure it's all okay. Lighting in Unreal can get a bit funny sometimes too. Bear in mind that like sometimes it can be shadows and stuff can sometimes not cast onto objects, and it can be hard to figure out exactly what's going on. So I'm going to dismiss that. So this is our scene. So I think I'm going to leave that pretty much like that, and we're going to start like decorating the space basically. So this folder here, starter content. Okay, this is all the stuff. Remember at the start we hit include starter content. Okay, that folder down the bottom, kind of like the project folder in Unity, that has all the starter content in it. Okay, if we want to fill this level with stuff, where do you think the best folder to get stuff from? Out of those ones? Props? Yeah, exactly. Cool. So just like a movie or something, or props, we can start decorating the scene with. Okay, so I'll expand this up a little so you can see it. Cool. So we've got some different sort of props here and things that we can lay out. Let's say first thing I'm going to do is just like, basically I just want to create like a hedge kind of around this. Okay, and just by duplicating that, now one thing is this probably doesn't look great. Put a slight rotation on each of these. Maybe rotate them different directions. Have one of them maybe go a little bit like that. This one a bit like that and like that. And all of a sudden we have a hedge that looks maybe a bit more like a hedge. Does that make sense? Okay, again, level design, you're reusing, even though it's a one single hedge, this looks much more like kind of a complete hedge. Cool. So I'm going to select each of these. Hitting Control, or I could marquee select inside in the editor. And if I want to make this hedge seem a bit thicker, I can do this. And I'm going to hold down Alt, drag it over this side, Alt, and drag it this way too. Okay, and now we maybe have a nice little, something that's starting to be a nice little room for our level design. Okay. Sorry? So it'll, if you scale it in one direction, it'll really affect the quality, but like scaling that up, it's probably a good idea to scale a few of these up and down and stuff. Because at the minute they still look a little bit uniform. If I scale this like that, to be honest, actually it doesn't look too bad. Sometimes you get away with it. I'm going to do the same on this side because I kind of like that effect. But yeah, you can scale and see what happens. Generally what happens if you scale one dimension, it's like, I don't know if this happened to any of your student cards, but sometimes they'll end up scaling a picture and they'll take it from one aspect ratio and they'll just like scale it one way and like it's like your face is elongated basically. And that's the same thing can happen when you scale assets in one way. Sometimes assets will have certain detail levels, so if it doesn't have a high level of detail and get really close, it doesn't look great. But if you're working on a game often, and that's the thing the level designer needs, the artist will actually go back in and like recreate and tweak those assets and stuff. Okay, and create a higher level of text. So that's that there. We maybe want to make this room feel quite welcoming. So I'm just going to eyeball this. I'm going to put a couple of lamps on the wall here. If this was a proper level design, like, we definitely want to do this properly. We'll maybe hang a ceiling light from here. What else do we have? Let's throw the yellow table in the middle of the room. Couple of chairs. Okay, so it starts to look a little bit like a space. This thing here is just a statue, so it's quite small. And this is the kind of thing we can actually like scale up or down. So we might actually move this to here, so it's like a little statue water featurey type thing there. We'll maybe want a couple of couches. As you can see there, as I rotate this underneath, it's telling me how many degrees it is. So I'm going to just get it to 90 degrees. Maybe put it there. I'm trying to avoid having geometry sticking through it. And I'm just going to duplicate it over this way. And rotate it 180. And we start to have a space that, you know, it starts to feel a little bit more like a level. Can anyone think of stuff we should add in at this stage? There's more props there and we can go pretty nuts on adding them in. I think that's probably enough props. One thing to know actually, in Unreal with these standard assets, it's quite a nice asset to use if you include them. With this glass window. So I'm going to rotate that 90 degrees. And you can see the anchor point is this corner. Oh, this corner down here. I don't know if you can see there. It's right in the middle of the wall at the minute. It's kind of hard to see the effect of it. But basically it creates slight reflections and stuff. So I want it right in the middle of the wall. There, like that. But I need to scale it up from this end. Because the anchor point's at that end. Again, this is like protruding way out the back of the structure. It doesn't matter because our player should never get outside there. So, I'm going to hit Alt. Move that into position. And then we've got our glass in place. What else do you think we should add in? Outside of props. Wallpaper, yeah, we should definitely texture the walls and the ground. Anything else people can think of? Lighting, yeah. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do before I add the materials, I'm actually going to just put in a little bit of lighting. And to do that, over here on the left hand side, this place actors menu. There's a section here, lights. What type of light do you think represents these sort of wall sconces type thing? Yeah, you can do point light. Any other type of light work for that? Yeah, and we can go with either, right? Like, there's no right or wrong answer on this. We can pretty much go with either one. In fact, you know what I'll do? I'll stick a point light over this one. And again, this is where switching between views, top down and stuff can be quite useful. So I can place that there. Cool. Place inside now. I'm going to rotate this. Sorry. Okay, go. Going to rotate that 180 degrees. You can see the effect that's having there on the ceiling. I'm going to change the color of this a little bit. Sorry, I'm going to select the move tool. There's this eyedropper here I can use when I'm selecting the color picker of the light. And I'm going to try and pick up, can you see there the way the light color changes depending on what I hover over? So it goes from grey to blue. I'm going to try and pick up some of this like sort of yellowish tone of the light. Okay, because in reality this light would have a slight yellowish tone, so it would pick up the object it's kind of being emitted from. Cool. So, did I lose track of that? Cool. So then, there should be lighting properties here for the. I missed that. Is that at the top? Yeah. I think I might need to override this thing. I can't remember where I changed the angle of that light, basically. But we're able to change. Oh, do I have it still selected? No, sorry, that's the problem. Spotlight is what I want. Cool. So this outer cone angle, I can change that here so that it spreads the light further. Does that make sense? So you can see there it's got like a bigger spread on the light. There's an inner cone angle as well, which is like it creates a blank area inside it. We won't need that for this purpose. We can change the attenuation radius basically, which is how far the light will be cast from this. So it could be, it's actually quite nice if it doesn't go that far. So it just shines onto the wall there. Okay, and that's our spotlight there set up. We'll set up the other two lights as point lights. So hit F on the keyboard, focusing on that. I'm going to move it to here. Cool. This time, again, light color. I'm going to use the eyedropper. Pick up a little bit of this color. And that selects that. But I'm going to go select the light. I'm going to decrease the intensity a bit on this, so that it just kind of warms a little bit in that way. Okay, cool. So, and then I'm going to hit Alt on the keyboard and duplicate this across to here. Yeah, okay, cool. So if I maximize this viewport now, okay, you can see the effect of those lights. I'm just going to hit play so you can see it. So that's how I start. I look back here. Here's how it looks in the level. Okay, do people have a preference for which one works better? Yeah, I think I kind of prefer the point lights a bit. The effect at the minute that they're giving is maybe a bit severe. So, let's say one thing you could do is duplicate this. I'm going to select photo on. Cool. I'm going to hit Alt and move them down this way a little. And I'm going to really have a very low intensity on this. So let's say 0.5 or something. And I'm going to turn off cast shadows on that. And head to the top view. And now if we press play, this might or might not. Oh, hold on. I'm going to maximize this view, press play. Okay, so that effect might be a little bit nicer where it looks like it's emitting a bit of light. Okay, but you can play around with this stuff lots. I'm going to just take one of those bulbs that's back here. And I'm going to go into top view. And I'm going to move this underneath the light shade. So holding Alt is going to duplicate this. And that's going to place it underneath the light shade. You just need to move it down a little. Can you see that effect there on the light shade? You can see like it's almost as if it illuminates the light shade. And you can see the chairs start to pick up the light and stuff as well. Okay, so it almost looks like there is a light bulb in there. To go above it, the chairs don't really pick up the light as much. So now we press play. Sorry. Go to this view and press play. And we kind of have our lights working. As long as we're happy with that. Cool. This light probably isn't working. I might need to set that to... Let's set that. Sorry. So similar to Unity, Unreal will only render a set number of lights, point lights within a given space. So yeah, that's the one that's not rendering properly. If I set that to movable, yeah, if that's movable, it'll let me have a little bit more light there, or if it's static, because it'll break the lights. Okay. Cool. So then what we were saying next was texturing the walls. Where do you think we'd find the details for texturing the walls? Materials, yeah. So again, inside in our starter content, we have materials here, loads of different things. Okay, so we might go for like this wood floor walnut for the ground, and to apply that we just drag it, and that's going to apply it to the ground. Okay, cool. Now, we'll talk about that in a minute, what's going on there, because they're the world's biggest wood planks, but you can probably figure out why that's the case. So the roof then, we might want to go, there is a poured concrete here. I'll place that for there. For the walls, we might want kind of, let's say this back wall, we'll go for these clay bricks. Okay, and then the side walls, we will go for, what do we have here? There's a basic wall material here that we might use. Okay, so I'm just going to shrink this down a little. Press play. And now here's our level. Yeah. Oh, you definitely need more. So like this is just the starter content, so it's like you decorate it with what's there. But let's say you're making Dead Space or something like that. You know, you'll have access to a full kind of materials pack. The other thing is if you go to, I'll show you this in a second. One thing I wanted to do is just build the lighting so that you can see that happening as well. Just we should see the lighting level improve a little bit. Yeah. Okay, our light's going to look a little bit more realistic. But that's one of the things, if you don't build lighting, sometimes you'll lose track of what way things should be. That's basically our room. One thing we can do is, I'm going to go all the way to the top here on the right hand side of the world outliner. And select the light source. And we can kind of rotate this around just to get, oftentimes daylight is not the nicest light in the world. So you can maybe go for more sort of a, as we rotate that light source, it's our sun and we get kind of a nicer effect. Be very conscious, daylight generally in games, it could kind of blow everything out, like the noon is not a nice time. Does anyone do photography? interesting photography. You'll often find photography shots, they never look great if it's a really bright sunny day, because everything is like super illuminated. Instead, like if you get something like this, you get kind of a much nicer atmosphere and feel to the level. Okay, and we can pretend this is like Lando Calrissian's like cloud, I don't know, suite, meeting room, whatever it might be. Okay. We can, if I open up the Epic Games Store. Oh no. Okay, I don't think I'll be able to do that in here over Edge Roam. But you can search. If you go into, when you're at home on your own Wi-Fi, I'm assuming this is an Edge Roam issue. You can go into Unreal Engine and Marketplace. Actually, I might not be on the Wi-Fi yet, that's the problem. Marketplace, and you can search there for stuff like materials, and you'll find material packs that people have out there.
Everyone doesn't connect the stream, so that's probably the issue.
I think there's definitely an issue. I'm not connected to the internet, so it definitely won't work. I hope if anyone has a laptop, check to see if you can get into the Epic Games Store. It would be kind of handy to see. Are there any questions on that, folks? Yeah. How I did which? The cutouts, yeah. Cool. So to show the window style cutout, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to geometry, and I'm going to select the cylinder. I'll place it there. I'll rotate it forward 90 degrees. I should really have gone for a higher quality cylinder. Oh my goodness. Cool. So basically, as long as this is protruding through the wall, I'm just going to change this in brush type over on the right hand side in the details panel from additive to subtractive. And boom. Now the cool thing about this is I can grab this brush, and because it's non-destructive, I can be like, actually I want that over there, and I'm going to duplicate it and have another one on this side. Okay, does that make sense? It's non-destructive, it's just going to kind of cut out a hole wherever you place it. Yeah. So that's a really good question. Okay, this, what we're using here is like VSP, it's geometry. This is, if you want to think about it this way, this is your rough sketch of the level. What normally happens in a production workflow in a studio, you'd have 3D artists who would then they'd create like a, double porthole wall asset. And they'd have that as a standard asset you can bring in, and you replace your VSP with that. Does that make sense? So basically, this would generally get replaced with higher quality assets. This is kind of like a first pass, a way to get kind of rough and ready geometry that resembles the space you're trying to create. Does that make sense? Cool. And we'll look at some things. I don't know if Baz last year talked about modular level design much. Often what you'll get is, you'll actually see it here in the starter content props. So if we go into props here, so this pillar here says SM pillar 300, which means that's a 300 high version of the pillar. You might have an SM pillar 200 and 100. Basically, you have these props with slight variations. Does that make sense? Which? Yeah, they're kind of like prefabs. They're basically like, but like they're just 3D models with properties, and it's basically like Lego bricks, basically modular level design. It's like, there'll be a slab of wall that's like soundproofing wall 1 meter. And it's like, you can just duplicate that and have a wall run along. Yeah, cool. And I'll show you examples of that in a few weeks. Once we get to the stage of wiring and that stuff like modular assets. Cool. Someone else have a question? Yeah. You see wrapping, it's still not, If you're doing any wrapping or unwrapping, like you're better off doing it in 3D Studio Max or Blender or like a 3D modeling program. You can do a little bit of it on Unreal, but it won't be great. Cool. Any other questions, folks? Cool. So, I'm going to give you a bit of homework to do. For those of you who have laptops, you can stay in the lab and I'll be around to help you out. But the piece of homework is I want you to use the tools we've shown today in class and just the starter content and geometry. Okay, don't go downloading extra packs and stuff to recreate a room that you know. Okay. The easiest thing to do, I don't want to like force it to be a room in your house, but the easiest thing to do is pick a room in your house, like your sitting room or something like that, and be like, okay, here's what my sitting room would look like with these assets. Okay? I'm not saying don't try and create something, even this scale is too big. Okay, there's too much like detail and things inside here for it to be really effective. Okay, so think of it, unless, look, if someone has a huge house, you might need to find a small room in that house. If this is the size of your sitting room, you're very, very lucky. But try and create basically a room in your house using those tools we've shown. Okay? It doesn't have to be your house necessarily. It could be like, look, I don't want to assume the size of people's houses and stuff, but just a room, a simple room basically, that has textures on the walls, has some lighting, and has geometry within the room and some props. Okay? Yeah. Oh yeah. So that's a bit of a funny one. At the minute, the floor is like this. I think I just want to see if I can change that here. Yeah. No. Cool. So the simple way to fix this problem, unfortunately, is to delete this piece of floor, replace it with a box, and I'm going to go into brush edit mode. Drag these down to the floor. Oh. And I'm just going to drag, basically create a new floor out of this. And now I can go back into starter content, materials, and instead of dragging it, sorry, I'm going to go back to select mode. Instead of dragging that walnut material, I'm just going to say right click and sorry, no. Sorry, that's a different thing. So I'm just going to drag this onto the floor there, basically. And now if we press play, that properly tiles. Does that make sense? The issue there is to do with the asset, and there's not too much I can do to fix the asset because it has its own UVs. I think there's a way I can tweak that if I go into like, it's a whole different thing to try and fix it. Or the easy thing to do is actually use geometry because it allows, like, it'll let the geometry wrap smoothly, the materials wrap around it. Yeah. Yeah, we're going to take the 15-minute break now. For anyone who has laptops, you can come back and work on that. I'm here to help you. Anyone who doesn't have laptops, just try and work on this at home or on the one machine that's in this lab. I'll let you know when there's more machines. And then if there's any issues, just send me a message on Discord and I'll try and help you out with it, basically. Okay? But for next week, just have a room in your house, basically. Okay? Modeled using the tools we've shown today. Cool.